Hey guys, it's QuickyBaby and welcome back to World of Tanks, and this time I'm playing in one of my favorite tier 10 vehicles in the game at the moment, the T110E5. Now the T110E5, the tier 10 American Heavy tank, the one without an autoloader and a magazine, has always been a great vehicle in World of Tanks. It's just such a great all-rounder, at least frontally, but it always had some weak points, i.e. the top and the bottom, that was such a downside to the vehicle, and considering that there are other options, such as the FE215B, which gets a more competitive 120mm, didn't really feel like something that you would want to always go back to. Well, at least for me, after playing a few hundred games in the tank. Then comes along patch 9.10, the vehicle was put into high definition, and there were a lot of changes to this tank, which I've covered in a couple of videos before, so I'm only going to just briefly go through them. Basically, the top part of the machine gun was buffed a hell of a lot. Now you have to hit this rim area here below the actual machine gun if you want to penetrate the cupola. And also just all round, frontally, was made more resilient. And so I've been playing this tank a lot more recently and enjoying it a lot. If you can get into a frontal situation, as we're going to be defending an assault on Erlenberg, and we're going to be able to get ourselves into a frontal situation, then the tank is just so consistent and so strong. And I think it's also a real good pick for pretty much most players in the game at the moment to start to get the kind of ridgeline work that you need to learn to do at tier 10 in some of your heavy tanks to really have the impact in the game. Now, of course, ridgeline work is something that's not new to the American heavy tank line. You will have had to have done some significant good work if you would want to have got to the T110E5 in style. Starting with effectively the T29 really is the key one to start to learn after the M6. Then you've got the T32 that totally depends on a very, very powerful turret. So the gun is unremarkable. The hull, while it's okay, it's pretty good hull. It's not exceptional like the T110E5's hull. And so by the time you've got to the tier 10 American heavy tank, you pretty much learn that ridgelines are the way. And the T110E5 just takes it to a whole new level with the 120mm performance that you get on the M103, but also combining that with a lot more resilience on its turret and also on its hull. So I'm defending against an assault on Erlenberg here. The matchup is rather nice indeed. There are 4 tier 10 tanks on either team, no self-propelled guns to worry about, and there's a whole host, half of the enemy team are bottom tier, tier 8s. But we've also got to watch out because even tier 8 tank destroyers get guns which can contest tier 10 heavy tank frontal armor with the Ferdinand, the ISU-152, the Rheinmetall Borsig Waffenträger, and even the SU-101. If he hits some of my weak points, or even if he fires some premium rounds, it's going to be able to really cause me a lot of trouble. And that's something that you have to consider on Erlenberg. When I saw how many tank destroyers there were on the enemy team, I realized that they are going to be sitting all along this ridge and countering the position that you see me using here. So that's something that you've got to keep mindful of. When there were so many tank destroyers on the enemy team, I just knew that I couldn't hold here. If the matchup had been different and there had been perhaps more artillery on the enemy team, or maybe just less tank destroyers that are going to be able to get shots through this corridor, I knew that I didn't want to use this position, and instead I wanted to hold back here and hold this ridge line, keeping at least hull down against the TDs that are going to be in the corner of the map. Now, Erlenberg as a map for assault is generally 2 linear passes, right? The teams attack down the east, and the teams attack down the west. I haven't really seen an Erlenberg game that hasn't been a complete whitewash recently, that has been won with a successful attack down the east. I just don't feel like that is what the meta is at the moment. It feels like the meta is a slow grinding push down the west, generally with medium tanks and tank destroyers in this kind of G1 area, H1 area. And then what you find is that heavies and medium tanks try and push through, and they will try and take this location up here, specifically usually digging in here to provide vision for their friends that are going to be behind them, trying to dig out heavy tanks from this area, and then their heavies try to advance to here and slowly push around the corner and take it. Now, generally, Erlenberg defenses are lost when you don't put in a sizable amount of tanks here. I feel like that is the key, really, for Erlenberg Assault to defending, is that you want to invest enough tanks to hold the east, but also a superior number of tanks to hold the west. I feel like that is the most important thing to do. So I'm getting some shots here at the tank destroyers that are trying to get some shots in at the back, and I want to prioritize them. I want to kill them and not so much focus on maybe the heavy tanks that are at the front. There's a brave Tier 8 Soviet heavy tank, the ISU-152, possibly using that monstrous BL-10 gun. Don't want to get hit by that, but luckily I can shoot his upper hull armor that he's got angled upwards, and he doesn't really have a chance to be able to hit my tank. That's one of the advantages that you need to take when you're engaging tank destroyers. The fact that generally the whole of the upper part of their armor is going to be vulnerable, and they're not even going to be able to hit you. Now we can see my armor holding up very well indeed. We've already bounced 3,350 damage. You hear all those ricochets that we're getting from probably the Tier 8 and possibly even a Tier 9 tank destroyer that's up there. T110E5 armor has been so darn good since patch 9.10. So now we can afford to be a bit more aggressive. This game's still pretty close, but we're 2 tanks up. And now I can go to here. Now I can go hull down and be able to start to grind out my opponents. And this Waffenträger E100 is trying to put some good shots into us. And oh god, he really did hit us hard there. We lost our commander and our gunner to a single shot. He's firing high explosive rounds from that 150mm autoloader. What a disaster that is for us. Not only now are we inaccurate, but also you can see that our view range has become terrible, which means that we've got no chance of spotting those tank destroyers that are there. However, we can still gun out these guys, taking down the T110E4. And realistically, I should probably be reloading a high explosive shell here. But it's not like I needed the extra alpha damage on a high explosive round to be able to take out that target. The Waffenträger Panzerwehr, that I believe hasn't been spotted until now, finally gets lit up by my team. And we have managed to hold that ridge line like a complete boss. 6,200 damage done so far. A couple of kills and probably a bit of spotting. But towards the end, we started to have quite a lot of pressure put up on our vehicle. In retrospect, I guess I probably should be using a premium med pack on this tank. Maybe my crew wouldn't have got knocked out so much, and if 2 crew do get knocked out at the same time by a high explosive round, like it just happened, at least we could have put them back in. So, when your commander's dead, Sixth Sense doesn't go off. I get a surprise fire, probably from a Ferdinand using 105mm, doing 320 alpha damage to the side of my vehicle. And that puts me in a dangerous situation where I can't afford now to get shot by the Waffenträger Panzerwehr, who's going to be probably using 128mm of stopping power against me. So in these kind of situations, you need to be thinking, will I die to a single shot from my opponents? Well, we've already figured out that the Ferdinand is using the 105mm, and so I don't really need to be too worried about the Ferdinand. The Ferdinand can't one-shot me, but that Tier 9 German tank destroyer, the WT Alpha Panzerwehr, will definitely one-shot me. We've had to do so much butt-kicking this game that we've run out of our standard ammunition, and unfortunately now, wasting some heat rounds here against these Tier 8 and Tier 9 opponents. When I see that the Waffenträger Panzerwehr dies, then I know I can get over. And we have an easy shot into the back of the Ferdinand. Now, I didn't know what health the T110E5 was currently. Looking back on this, I should be loading one of my high explosive rounds here. Look how inaccurate our tank is, with a dead gunner and a dead commander. Oh, dear gosh. Hitting the wrong part of that turret, bouncing off his side. And if I'd been firing a high explosive round, it probably would have impacted on his tank anyway and taken him out. So a huge result for probably one of the best heavies tier for tier in the game at the moment, the T110E5. We were able to use the frontal armor, the fairly reliable 120mm main armament that this vehicle gets, and its fairly decent 8 degrees of gun depression to just be picking apart our opponents one by one and holding, in my opinion, the most important place on Erlenberg Assault. But what if my team hadn't agreed with me and invested such a large number of tanks holding this location? What would we have done? Well, I believe that I would have still come here initially and tried to hold this location and get some free damage at tanks that advance. Also, using positions such as this, you can get some good view range for your team, get an idea of what your opponents might be doing, and generally when there are self-propelled guns on your team and the enemy team, they're going to be able to assist you and you're going to be able to soften some targets up. However, when the slower, heavier tanks on the enemy team start to reach this position here, then it's usually time to pull back if you don't have a load of friends on this flank. The best way I've personally found to do this when the game reaches that stage is to turn your tank around, fall down this ridgeline, and then try and get back here. From this location, you can set up a second defense, being able to engage opponents that try and poke their turrets out here, and also surprise people that generally come around this corner expecting to shoot at people that will be defending here or defending there. Once you find that this position becomes overwhelmed as well, then it's time to make your final retreat, which will be to here along the ridgeline, trying not to be taken by Erlenberg, and then you've got to try and get across the dip and be able to dig in on this corner of your heavy tank. Alternatively, if you're a medium, I love to fall back along this corridor and be able to get shots on hopefully the vision that people will be providing from here. And then finally, your last ditch attempt is to fall back here where you can hopefully use the trees and the bushes in this location and this location to be able to get spots and shots into the cap circle without your opponents knowing where you are. And often a lot of players will ask me, well, what's the difference between a good player and a great player? And this is certainly one of those key attributes. A great player will analyze when the situation is going to become unfavorable to the point where they're going to be overwhelmed and taken out the game and fall back into a superior position where they can then make a better use of their vehicle. Luckily for us, however, that didn't have to happen on Erlenberg today, and we created a ridiculous graveyard down the west of this map. And I don't think a single enemy tank even bothered to try and cross and attack down the east. And it doesn't look like it did the enemy team very good, as they got surrounded in probably about maybe a quarter or a third of the entire map and taken out one by one. So let's just take a very quick look at the post-game stats. So this was quite a result for the T110E5, as you would expect in a matchup and map such as this, which definitely favored the vehicle. We got a high caliber medal for a huge amount of damage, over 7,500 this round. Unsurprisingly, a steel wall medal as well, as we blocked over 4,000 damage with the great frontal armor on this vehicle. And we also managed to provide a supporting role for our team, picking up a Confederate medal and also doing about 2,000 assistance damage. Now, there was certainly nothing really exceptional about what I did in this game. Simply read the situation, put the tank in the correct position to highlight its strengths, and didn't make any mistakes. And when you're consistent and playing in such a well-rounded tank, then eventually you can have a good game, right? And also I should show the detailed report, and even though we had to fire a few of those dirty heat rounds at the end, we still made a cool 42,000 credits profit. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this video, or maybe you just felt my analysis of the Erlenberg Assault useful. If it was, please do consider giving it a like down below. It really helps the channel out. And if this has left you hungry for some more Tier 10 American Heavy Tank gameplay, then simply click through up here and you can see why Robbie won a Type 59 in the 300,000 subscriber replay competition. And I'd be interested to know what you guys think about the Assault game mode. Do you have it switched on? Do you have it switched off? If so, why have you chosen to do so? And as always, thank you so much for watching. You've been epic, and hopefully I'll see you soon.